Our reading today comes from 2 Chronicles chapter 34, and it's really focused on the story of King Josiah. According to the chronicler, after David and Solomon, Josiah is the greatest king that Judah ever had, and he's the last good king that he has. He began to reign when he was just 8 years old. Yesterday I talked about Josiah being 16. Well, cut that in half. No one can imagine a third grader being the king of a country. Of course, he was being influenced by the adults in the court around him, but we're told, according to the chronicler, that very early into his reign, in the 8th year of his reign, that means when he was 16, he began to seek the God of his ancestor David. And in the 12th year, so now when he's 20, as a young man, he begins to purge Judah and Jerusalem of all the idols and the images and all the false worship that had been practiced, even though God forbids it explicitly in the Ten Commandments and in so many other places in the Hebrew Bible. And in the 18th year of his reign, so he's 26 years old, and he's now going to devote money and workers to rebuilding and fixing up and repairing the house of the Lord his God. And while that renovation work is taking place, they were working, and the priest Hilkiah, we're told in verse 14, found the book of the law of the Lord given through Moses. Have you ever watched Antique Roadshow or seen some other TV show where somebody says, my great-grandparents died and we were cleaning out their attic and we found this old piece of paper and it was a copy of the Declaration of Independence, and everyone's, wow, that's amazing. Well, that's the sort of thing that happens here. They find a copy of the first 5 books of the Bible, and when those words are read to King Josiah, he tears his clothes as a sign of repentance and mourning because he knows that they have totally not followed the word of the Lord. And verse 21, our verse of the day, says, "Go inquire of the Lord for me, and for those who are left in Israel and in Judah, concerning the words of the book that has been found. For the wrath of the Lord that is poured out on us is great, because our ancestors did not keep the word of the Lord to act in accordance with all that is written in this book." And so Josiah then goes on and tries to enact further reforms to get the nation and the people back on track. But sadly, we'll discover later in chapter 35 that he makes, even good King Josiah, a grievous error in judgment that leads to his end and his death. And the book of Chronicles, 2 Chronicles, ends with the fall of Jerusalem, and the book that had started so hopefully with King David, which then proceeded to Solomon. And Solomon leads to the division into 2 kingdoms of Israel and Judah, who both end up being conquered, Israel by the Assyrians, Judah by the Babylonians, and the people are carried off into exile for a period of time. And next week, we'll turn to Ezra to talk about what happens after this time of great disruption. Think of King Josiah, though, and the importance of obeying the word of the Lord.